EECA, Mike Underhill. Mike has been Chief Executive of EECA for since 2007, and prior to that he has been Chief Executive of Well Networks, TransAlta and Energy Direct, and he's also been Chairman of Pacific Energy Limited and various other, including Waikato Regional Development Agency. Mike has a bachelor degree in engineering and a master's in economics, and has done programs at Harvard, and he's also a fellow of the Institute of Professional Engineers. As I say, Mike is Chief Executive of EECA, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, and I'm sure we'll have some extremely interesting things to say about the subject of energy efficiency. So can we welcome Mike to the stage.
Thanks very much, Paul. Thank you for having me. Has the Minister left? No, he's still. Minister, I had one piece of advice. Now that I congratulate you on expanding your family during the week, that's a sincere congratulations. If you're looking for a people mover, there's a new one on the market that is a plug-in hybrid, 1.9 litres per 100 kilometres.
I've already told you I'm interested. It's one of these ground guys.
And if the Mayor's still here, I do see her riding a bike, an electric bike. She damn near bowled me over the other day. Just the fact you ride a bike doesn't give you some divine right to take over the entire road. And I walk to work because we have a fantastic compact city. Okay, I want to say a few things. I'm not sure how we're going to play the time there, Paul.
Just keep going, Mike.
Just keep going. I'm sorry, I'll be going for lunchtime, so that's fine. So let's start. I'm actually going to start with a minute. Oh, you've got the stop sign. Now, I'm not pushing non-renewables, but it is interesting. The reading I do around the world is gas is seen as the saviour in the energy sector. So I'm not saying that to say that's good or bad, but if you read all the international stuff, it's seen as the clean fuel. And I think we say compared to oil and coal, well, it's certainly cleaner than that. But what is interesting, I think, is the impact that has. So if you look at the United States, I think their philosophy has changed from energy as a real critical strategic issue. Energy security is a real issue. Now they've got this gas, they're saying we're energy self-sufficient and we can export. That has quite a dramatic impact on a whole series of things, particularly renewables. Because if you're going to be self-sufficient, where is one of the biggest potential markets in the world going for renewables? Internationally, oil. Well, we know it's the biggest and most transported and probably most volatile fuel, although coal's been pretty volatile lately. And it certainly has a major impact on New Zealand with where that volatility might go to. And just to look at the New Zealand situation, it's by far our biggest import. So we've got all these other things we import, vehicles, machines, electrical stuff, plastics, etc. The biggest is that. So sitting in our economy, the impact of oil coming in is a very significant part of our economy. You can't read this, and you're not meant to, because there's got lots of secrets on the back of it. But I find that actually gives, in my view, a good overview of the situation in New Zealand. So on the left-hand side up at the top, we've got the greenhouse gas profile. I've got a better slide of that coming up. And if you look at that, half of that's sort of energy related. The bar charts to the right of that pick up the main sectors. And this is the point I want to stress really importantly. We have a really peculiar fetish in New Zealand that energy is all about electricity. Of course electricity is important. Actually, electricity is our smallest energy sector. It's dominated by transport and it's dominated by heat. The heat market, which is almost a secret, is much bigger than electricity. So we anguish, as we probably should, over electricity issues, and we anguish about renewable electricity, but if you're being serious for New Zealand and you want to think about renewables, then why don't you think about transport renewables and process heat renewables? Because that's where the carbon is in the sector, and that's where the opportunity for renewables is. So I just want to state that, because as I go through this section today, although I'm passionate about doing things in residential electricity, etc., I'm trying to say in the bigger picture in New Zealand, where our PJs are and where our carbon is in those transport and heat markets. And the green there is the renewables, and the dirty colour is the dirty fuels. So if you look at transport, there is a thin green line on the bottom, which are the electric trolley buses in Wellington. May they continue. And if you look in heat, actually there's about 30% of heat is from renewables, so there's an opportunity there. The things on the left are the pie charts. You break down electricity into industrial, residential and commercial. You break down transport into its various sectors, I have a slide coming on there, and you break down heat into its various sectors. It's quite an interesting way to look at the energy sector in New Zealand to see where the opportunities are, both in supply and demand. So there's that top left-hand corner. So the Minister referred to this, but if you look at New Zealand in carbon, it's about half and half. Half is energy related, half is agriculture, animal related. And there's all sorts of concerns about the technology developing as to how you can address the agricultural things, but actually there's a lot of opportunity in the energy ones as to how you can address those. So if you're interested in carbon, and I certainly am, then I think that's a good starting point as to where you might put some effort. And you see, transport is 20% of the whole picture. So if you look at New Zealand, and this is in terms of future energy, so we currently get lots of hydro, etc., etc. But if you look at sort of the potential, and I use PJs, I think are a fantastic figure, but a PJ for the average person is a nonsense figure, absolute nonsense. So the way I translate it is a PJ sort of costs about $50 million. So if you say 10 PJs, that's a $500 million block of energy, and that sort of catches your attention. So if you look at biomass, that's all the woody sort of stuff, there's at least 100 petajoules of technical potential. You look at geothermal, there's about 30 petajoules. You look at solar, and I know there's a PV debate going, there's a ton of solar potential, we know that. There's still even hydro. Wind, coming out of our ears, and marine. This sector is really struggling to get traction in New Zealand, even though we have some of the best marine resources in the world, because they're having to compete with other renewable electricity. And then if you look down the bottom of PJs, prospectivity, we think there's about 900 PJs of oil. New Zealand uses about 550 PJs of energy each year. It's about 2,000 PJs of gas, and there's a small number which you can't read of coal. But I think that says 260,000 PJs. If you believe in coal, there's a lot of energy obviously tied up there. So what I say is, we have, if we look at the future, we have the energy. Can we use it wisely, and can we make the right choices? And I think that's really important. And the boast for New Zealand is, Celia might call us the coolest little capital, we have the highest renewable energy potential per capita anywhere in the world. Actually, for New Zealand's population, we have the highest fossil fuel potential per capita anywhere in the world. So all I'm saying is there are some important decisions to be made as to how you exploit and use for the best purposes these two things on each side. So I am talking a bit about renewables, although I thought you thought I was going to talk about energy efficiency. I'll come to that. What is interesting, there's a question over there before about 90%, are you really going to get it? Well, I'm an optimist, and I certainly believe in going for that. There's 3,500 megawatts of consented renewables already sitting out there. And if you've ever been on the other end of trying to get a consent, it's really, really hard work. Now, I know 3,500 megawatts, and our maximum demand is about 7,000 megawatts at present, so there's a lot of renewables out there. There's another step you have to go to get them built. But there's flat and falling demand, which is what's happening in electricity. Where's that going to go to? And renewables competing with each other. As I said, we have significant marine energy potential. I hope there's no one from Awatea here. But in my view, they're going to have to think about 2030 sort of thing before that thing comes on the market, because these wind guys are going to hit them, the geothermal guys are going to hit them, and the PV guys are going to blow the pants off them. So we've got this competition sitting in there for renewables, which is really quite unusual in a global sense. So my view is, if we're going to talk renewables, why aren't we talking transport and why aren't we talking heat? That is where the opportunity is, and that is where the carbon is being emitted. So if you're seeing any link between energy and carbon, let's think about that. So we're very proud, 75% renewable electricity, and that's a good thing to be proud of. But actually, if you look at New Zealand, we never use this figure. We're 35% renewable. How often do we say that? And that's because transport and process heat is obviously a lot less than that. So I reckon we could go to majority renewables. That's 50% renewable. Why don't we have that as a target and think about what we might do to stimulate the transport and the heating sector to drive towards that? Move on. So here's the way I look at energy, and I look at it from a bit of a climate change point of view. And all I'm trying to show on this graph is this. If that red line with no dimensions on it is the business as usual growth in energy, sort of the rule of thumb we talk about is there's sort of about 20% you gain from, in current technology, from energy efficiency. Actually, there's a lot more potentially, but there's sort of 20%. So that's that dotted grey line. This is he pointing at something you can't see. That's the dotted grey line that's just underneath it. But actually the rest is renewable. So if you're looking at the 100% of energy, you can play a game in energy efficiency, which I very strongly support, but look at the games you can play in renewables. And that's why I'm saying renewables is a very important part of New Zealand looking to our future. PV debate, love to get into that. I think you've got a speaker coming up. We put a small article in a small paper last week and generated a bit of interest. I want the debate to occur because we have a huge PV potential. I personally believe from a national benefit point of view, PVs are competing with other renewables, so there's an interesting thing there. And would I put one on my roof? Well, I have a stack that's ready to go on my roof, but I'm a geek, so of course I'll do that. But is it really economic? We can have the debate. My view is for PV to be economic, you need to bundle it with other stuff. You need to bundle it with the vector sort of stuff. You need to bundle it with the inverter manufacturer I spoke to last week, who said, yep, our inverter is going to be more than an inverter. It's going to control the appliances in your house, so everything with heat and thermal storage can be charged up by the solar during the day rather than being at night. They're the sort of innovations I think that are going to help pave the way for PV. But I'm just going to leave you with those points and like a coward back off it. But if anyone wants to debate, I'd love a debate on PV, and I think it's good for the industry to have that debate. Transport sector. So this is where I get excited because this is a big sector. And my view is all kilowatt hours are not equal. Now for technical geeks, I think there's the same amount of energy in a kilowatt hour in transport as there is, but there's a lot more carbon in a transport kilowatt hour than an electricity kilowatt hour. And one of the things that gave me some comfort, and I grew up being a boy racer, still have a turbocharged but very small car now, is if you look at the statistics of the top 10 vehicles sold in New Zealand, for you older guys, it used to be Holden Calais, Holden Commodores, Falcons, etc., etc. None of those cars are on the list this last year. They're all four-cylinder cars, and that's just part of we're seeing the fuel consumption going. Better driving behaviour. I've happened to see Ralph Sims drive a car, and the reason he gets a train down from Palmerston North is he wastes so much fuel driving his car because he's got a very heavy foot. I'm looking behind the thing there. So you might think he's a legend in the sector, but it's his driving behaviour that needs to improve. And actually it's all of us. And Ralph, you should hang your head in shame, but that's true. The thing I'm trying to say is, if you do your kilowatt hour reduction in transport, then you do something to your balance of payments, you do something to carbon emissions, and efficient drivers are safer drivers. How long do you lose your license for last time, Ralph? Efficient drivers are safer drivers, and you get reduced pollution. So there's a hell of a lot of boxes that get ticked if you look in the transport sector. Moving on. So if you look at the transport sector, and you look at that pie chart there, private vehicles dominate the transport sector. And then if you look across the other side, heavy trucks, etc., excuse me, the next biggest. And although I support buses, it's sort of 1.9%. So let's have a target to treble public transport. And why not? But what would that do to the transport picture? Because there's such a small point to start with. So I look at the Ralph Simses of the world in their private cars and say, can we improve the way they drive their vehicles, make better decisions on the sort of car they buy, etc., etc., because that's where you're going to get some serious stuff. And we have a thing right now with heavy vehicles where we have a program to improve the driving of heavy vehicles. So if you look from a renewable point of view, my view is EVs and light vehicles go hand in hand. And I think there's a real opportunity for transport in the future with EVs. I think with heavy vehicles using diesel, the technology with renewable diesel as a drop-in fuel is moving forward significantly. So I have a sort of an optimistic, renewable feel for transport, with the EV part of it for light vehicles and the biodiesel for heavy vehicles. And I love diagrams. I know you can't make any sense of that, but if you put an ounce of, or a gallon or a litre or whatever of water at the top into an electric vehicle, and you put something or other of oil into a petrol vehicle, it's just interesting where the losses occur in there, and how much energy you've got to put in a petrol vehicle to get that useful energy out the end. So this is sort of a useful energy coming out of the process. And so you can see where the oil goes to, there's losses on the way. Engine losses are significant. An ICE, an internal combustion engine, is only about 17% efficient. An electric vehicle, if you go down the same thing at the top, is about 75, 76% efficient. There is just dramatic improvements in the efficiency of an electric vehicle. I know the man nearly ran me over. I drove an electric vehicle to an old folks home, and he ran a whole series of old folks over because you can't hear them coming. This latest Mitsubishi Outlander thingamay, whatever it's called, it has a noise button. And seriously, and if you travel under 30k, the noise button defaults on. And it's a terrible noise. It goes brum, 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 and that's meant to frighten people outside. You can turn it off, and it turns off over 30 kilometres, because once you're over 30 kilometres an hour, road noise obviously is the dominant noise. So there you are. I think in the old days when cars were first invented, someone walked in front of them with a red flag. Okay, keep moving. So industrial heat. So this is the other part of my push. So we talk about transport. Industrial heat is about half, is about 30% of our energy use. Most of it comes from fossil fuels. Most of a large chunk of our emissions come from heat use. And we think there are some significant opportunities here in heat. So this is heat for boilers, for food processing. It's heat for furnaces. It's part of the market we don't normally see when we worry about these compact fluorescent lights, etc. This is a big user. So we think there's a lot of PJs that can be saved there. We think there's a hell of a lot of carbon to be saved there. And we think there's a hell of a lot of dollars that can be saved there. And we think switching from coal, which is a very dominant process heat source, to these other things can have a significant improvement also. Don't forget the heat market. So as you can see, the challenges. Yeah, it's very hard if you're going to put wood somehow into a machine. Is the wood going to be there when we need it? What's the security of supply like? There's generally a high cost to buy the capital equipment to start with, but a much lower cost over the life of it. But as a result, things aren't happening, and we just leave to rot a huge amount of energy sitting on the forest floor or waste wood from processing. I just think there's a real opportunity here. So, coming to energy efficiency, conservatively, and I've got our monitoring agent MD at this table watching me very closely, conservatively, because I'm a lot more optimistic, there's about $2.4 billion per annum of dollars that could be saved from energy efficiency. Now, the minister said to me, I can have 0.5% of everything that's saved of that in terms of dollars. No, I don't know if you get that, it doesn't matter. That's a lot of money. So I'm just saying 2.4 billion is a lot that can be saved. And it's sort of split residentially, about half, business about half. Transport's a big part of it. And in each of these sectors, we say there is a potential we can go for, and that helps us think about where we can get the best traction. So it's quite good to have your energy map to start with, look at the energy efficiency part, where are the potentials, and if you look at where are the potentials, then where is the readiest market to move into. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about residential programs, etc., etc. But if I look at energy efficiency, there's sort of been two main things. There's a technology one, a new piece of technology comes through, or we're not using the technology. We've sort of focused on that a fair bit at EECA. And then there's a behaviour change, and I see C sitting there after your disgraceful conference earlier this week, but that's the other part of it. And what we're doing is we're looking to move towards that behaviour change because we think there's some very significant gains that can be made. And if we look at what we call our products program in EECA, these are when you buy a fridge or a piece of industrial equipment. Most of them have got minimum standards on them. A lot of them have got labels on them. And how that's transformed the market with people changing their behaviour when they're making purchase decisions is quite interesting. So there's a graph. It's got something that doesn't seem to make sense, but I'll just explain it. We buy millions of appliances each year in New Zealand. So that's that greenish line. We've been going since 2002 with this program, and the orangey bit at the bottom is the energy savings to date, and the blue ones is if you buy a fridge in 2002, you sort of expect 10 years out of a fridge, so you can expect those savings to go on year for year. So why is the red line going down? Well, it's going down because appliances have a built-in life. So you're not going to get something lasting for years and years and years. So we're not worried that goes down because people change their appliances. We're just saying when they buy a new one, we want to see a better efficiency. So here is the mystery of the faith in terms of energy efficiency. People like me get really excited about kilowatt hours and petajoules and those really exciting things. But actually, here it is. The energy part is just a tiny part of the benefits. It's these multiple benefits that are often the biggest trigger for getting people to take action. So, if you're energy efficient, you reduce CO2 emissions. You, in the business sector where you're exporting stuff, you have a lower carbon, so you enhance our reputation. Health is really big. For any of you that have been working in the health sector or the residential sector, health is enormous. Transport safety, with Ralph aside, people that drive efficiently actually drive safely. Improve business productivity, blah, blah, blah. And what we find is, when you're putting a message out there, people often respond to these other things. For our residential installation program, people respond far more strongly to the health benefits, and that's fantastic. But we'll flip the ticket for the energy benefits, which, to be honest, aren't that high for installation. So challenges, just about finished. I think the real challenge for the energy efficiency sector is how we move towards the behaviour change. How do we change the behaviours of customers? Why is it that the energy sector, almost uniquely in the marketplaces in New Zealand, can't understand customers? We all buy electronics, we all buy stuff. Supermarket shopping and mall shopping in New Zealand is our favourite pastime. You may not know that. So we know how to, we've been persuaded by the retail people to do that. Why can't we do that in the energy sector? How can we use the multiple co-benefits? Huge benefits coming out of Walmart New Zealand. Safety and, as I said, transport, international protein market, low carbon is important. And even for commercial buildings. We are finding that people in buildings got a high neighbours rating. People are saying that's a far nicer building to work in. So it's that quality of life thing amongst the tenants. So that's driving landlords to do things. And it's not, that's not a word about energy, but it's a word that leads to lower energy being used. So research, I know there's a lot of researchers here, and I apologise, I left the residential sector out of that, so apologies to any of you doing research in residential, that was a gross oversight. But I think, from what I've been saying, the potential researchers, I'd like to see an energy resource assessment, how we get access to those. We have all the energy we need in New Zealand for centuries ahead. In transport, I think that's the big area. Where are the renewable fuel technologies? What's our role in New Zealand? Urban form, that's a big part of how much energy is used. What's the research being done there? What about the lifestyle? In heat, how do we access the renewable energy opportunities in heat? How do we get the supply-demand balance working? What about burner technology? And then the debate on PVs. How does the research sector help us in New Zealand understand what we should do there? And the final one is behaviour change. Let's get rid of all the bloody engineers and economists from the research sector and get the psychologists and behaviour people to do some real research. Do you have a psychology degree, Paul?
No.
Well, why are you heading this sector? Sorry. So just about their conclusions. Sorry for time. As I said at the start, I certainly believe we have the best energy potential both for renewables and fossil fuels. No value judgment in that statement. We do have an oversupply of consented renewable electricity, new technology being squeezed out. Why do we have such a fetish on electricity in New Zealand when the big energy games are being played in transport and heat? And if we addressed those markets, you imagine how we could brand New Zealand as being really low carbon rather than just worrying about light bulbs and electricity. And I just need to remind people, energy demand and supply go hand in hand. In New Zealand, we always think of it as energy supply. I think basic economics says that's not the case. So I know we can get $2.4 billion worth per annum of energy saving, but behaviour change is a great thing. And my invitation to researchers in this group, Paul, is what do you think about behaviour change? Thanks very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Mike. I absolutely knew you'd do the provocative bit. Thank you very much indeed. We've got time for a couple of questions, but Mike and certainly some of Mike's colleagues will be around. I see Brian there for the conference.
Terry's there, Ian's there.
So there are plenty of people around to pick up comments and questions with EECA during the conference. But if you've got a couple of questions from Mike now, anybody? Steve.
Yeah, Mike, Simon Bridges, when he was talking earlier, talked about a conservation campaign on electricity being a bad thing. But if we're after affecting the thinking and the behaviour of people, then surely bringing conservation of electricity to people's attention is a good thing.
You want to get me into trouble with the minister, don't you? Actually, I think conservation is a good thing. And if I can be a public servant for a moment to defend what he was saying, I think he was being asked the question, were you going to get to 90%? And if demand was rising, and actually I think energy efficiency needs to take some credit for it not rising, then you don't get the same opportunity to put the new renewables in. What I do agree with them is actually these renewables are coming in because we have no incentive for putting renewables in New Zealand, but they're coming in anyway. So I fully support conservation. I tend to think of conservation and behaviour change sort of in the same breath, and I think that's a major thing going forward. The question that would be harder for me to ask is, should we be putting our effort into electricity energy efficiency or transport energy efficiency or heat energy? And that gets quite a tough question because there's a lot of energy efficiency in electricity you can do. Where's the biggest bang for the buck?
C.
Thanks, Mike. You know how happy that presentation has made me as a behaviour change person and as somebody who's worked at EECA. In transport, we had a really great presentation in the storytelling workshop. I'm not sure if you still saw it. It was by Anusha from Z Energy. And it was right after Jenny talked so well about the love story of Warm Up New Zealand, and that really the absolute key to that unlocking that health potential was the public nurses, like that intermediary sector that could really go into people's houses. Who's your public nurse in the transport sector?
Oh, well, I think there are a number of public nurses. I'm not into nurses, just so we don't get that. Sorry, I apologise. But the equivalent is you look at your allies in there. So you look across from, you look at a car. Surprisingly, tyres are an important part of a car for safety and actually for fuel efficiency. We don't have fuel efficiency ratings on tyres. Many countries do. So why wouldn't a tyre dealer be the nurse? Because last time I went to get some tyres for my car, the guy said, "Have you thought about these fuel efficiency things?" I said, "No." And for $20 a wheel extra, which you pay off well in the life of the thing, how about it? So I did the deal. So these are the guys you need to get across there. When did you last tune your car? So you never did. But all I'm saying is you have a series of allies out there. I went to Mitsubishi when they went to launch, and I hate SUVs, when they launched their plug-in hybrid SUV. And I have to say I had a drive of it, and you know when it's doing 1.9 litres per 100 kilometres, and my super efficient Golf is only doing 5.5, where's it better? So there's a number of new allies coming into there that become your equivalent of your health nurse.
Let's just thank Mike again. Representatives from EECA will be around for the conference, so please do continue this dialogue because that was an extremely content-rich presentation. I don't know whether we've cleared it with you yet, Mike, but we'll also try and get that up on the website if you're happy for that presentation, given that we skipped through the slides quite quickly. I can always rely on Mike also to insult 95% of the audience, and he has completely dismissed our third and final keynote speaker for this session, Skip Leitner, because Skip is an economist. So engineers and economists and people who don't have psychology degrees, we've all got to leave. Thanks, Mike. Skip is a resource economist who leads a team of consultants with his own group, Economic and Human Dimensions Research Associates, based in Arizona, USA. He served nearly 10 years as a senior economist for technology policy at the US Environmental Protection Agency, and more recently he's led the Economic and Social Analysis Program for the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, which is a think tank based in Washington. He's an author of hundreds, literally hundreds of reports, journal articles and book chapters. He has 42 years of involvement in the environmental, energy and economic policy arenas. And having met Skip earlier this week, he's got a delightful sense of humour, and I think we're in for a treat. So please welcome Skip to the stage.
Good morning, everyone, and I I couldn't be more delighted to be here, even if I am an economist. And Mike, my colleague Karen Earhart, who is a sociologist, sometimes accuses me to be more of a closet sociologist than economist. So somehow I think we can meld the bridges. I couldn't be more delighted to be here, especially because I've learned that I can leave my hair shirt behind, which has been a real treat as well. Delighted to have that possibility at work. How to think about my talk here today. Yes, I want to talk about the economic imperative of energy efficiency, and I want to talk about it in the context of the costs and benefits of a surprisingly large resource, something even bigger than you've heard from the previous two speakers to this point. It's huge, but I'm going to build on the comments and extend those of what Mike had just said. In that sense, I'm going to be talking about not going further with energy, but going much, much further with energy. And in fact, we want to lay the foundation for asking the question, how much do we need in the first place with energy? What really can we do to accomplish work, meaningful economic, social activity with what energy? And then look to the resources to deliver, rather than approach from the supply side and then ask the question, how can we maybe nudgingly get a bit more efficiency out of the deal? In that regard, I'm going to build on the ideas of a remarkable speech. Some of you may know the name Richard Feynman. He was a physicist at California Institute of Technology, Nobel Prize winner. 1959, he gave a remarkable talk that's informed my thinking for the last 20 years. Remarkable in the sense that even before physicist Don Eigler at IBM learned how to manipulate cesium atoms under a microscope in 1989, 30 years before, Feynman was asking the question, how much room at the bottom? How much space do we really physically have to work with? And his talk, not a single equation in it, I highly recommend. I'm giving you the link to look it up. It ought to inform everybody at this conference. Plenty of room at the bottom. He was beginning to imagine in 1959 the capacity of storing the entire Encyclopedia Britannica on the head of a pen. Imagine that. And